you know that when you're in perimenopause and menopause, it is absolutely crucial that you regulate and balance your blood sugar levels? Today, we're going to talk why it's important and ways that we can do it. Stay tuned. Dr. Masley, I'm so happy to have you on our show today, a physician, a nutritionist, and I know other things. Can you just do a quick introduction so that our viewers can get a sense of how amazing you are?
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm a physician, nutritionist, trained chef, and creator of programs for public television, best-selling author, and really my passion is empowering people to optimize their health, their brain function, prevent heart disease, and feel amazing.
Thank you. And I'm so happy that you're joining us. So I heard you on our Naturally Savvy podcast. Unfortunately, I wasn't there for that interview, but my amazing co-host, Lisa Davis, did the interview. And I thought, my gosh, I need to have you on our Morphus show because you're a wealth of information and your focus, at least what you spoke about on Naturally Savvy, was blood sugar regulation. And when we get into perimenopause and menopause, why is it so important that we make sure that we balance our blood sugar levels?
Well, when you think about all hormone control, they're interlinked. They're not separate silos. They work, they have a web-like connection. So when your blood sugar regulation is out of control, your hormone metabolism is out of control. You're more inflamed, you gain weight, you're decreasing brain speed and brain performance. You're turning your brain cells off and killing them, and you're growing plaque in your arteries if your blood sugar is not controlled. So blood sugar control is really the number one cause of death, dementia, weight gain, diabetes, and it impacts menopause in a major way as well.
Yeah. So what the term that, I'm more familiar with these days is type 3 diabetes. And that's how they're referring to, I guess, blood sugar regulation, but how it affects our brain. Explain a little bit about how it got that name, type 3 diabetes.
Well, to have cognitive function, your brain cells need energy. And if you're insulin resistant, if you're eating too much sugar, too many refined carbs, even if your blood sugar is just slightly out of balance, insulin's essential to use brain cell energy for fuel. So if you it's like trying to drive your car with an empty gas tank. The car won't run. And if you keep running it, you're going to eventually damage the engine, which is what happens to our brain. So abnormal blood sugar control turns off our brain cells. And not only do you have more sluggish, are you brain fog, but your brain is literally shrinking, leading towards dementia. So we've started calling type 3 dementia as type 3 diabetes because it's the number one cause for memory loss and dementia today is elevated blood sugar levels. So, we had type 1, which was you lost cells that make insulin in your pancreas. Type 2 is people generally gain weight and have elevated blood sugar levels. But now we think of it as if you're having brain fog, that could be another sign of abnormal blood sugar control leading to memory loss.
Let's go to insulin resistance for a second, because that's the step before you get to a type 2 diabetes. Can you explain what that is and how it differs from type 2?
So insulin, as I just alluded to, is the hormone that helps your brain cells uptake energy, but it lowers blood sugar. It gives you blood sugar control. And when your insulin goes up, your appetite goes up. So if you're eating too much sugar, you're making more insulin. And over time, your cells become insensitive to that insulin message of telling the cells to absorb more sugar and take it out of the bloodstream. And eventually they just stop listening. They become resistant to insulin's message. And that creates all sorts of dysfunction. We're more inflamed. Our blood sugar levels just don't begin to go up, but we're growing plaque in our arteries. Our brain cells are dying. So a decade before someone might say you have diabetes, you're at increased risk for memory loss, for a heart attack, for a stroke, weight gain, all sorts of things that people don't want. And as I said, for women, it adversely affects hormone control. So for guys, they may have more testosterone resistance. For women, they're going to have more estrogen and progesterone dysfunction and worse menopause symptoms as well.
So could you have technically type 2 and type 3 diabetes? So is it something like that you have one or the other, or is it something you can
No, you can. You don't have type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is you don't make insulin anymore and you need insulin shots. Type 2 and type 3 are kind of the same thing. Type 2 is when you have elevated blood sugar levels and you're still making insulin. If anything, you're making too much insulin. The insulin just isn't sensitive anymore. Type 3 is when either pre-diabetes, just insulin resistance is there, or diabetes is there, and you're losing memory function. You're actually developing dementia and memory loss.
So for our viewers who are watching right now, they might be thinking, this sounds very interesting and something that I absolutely want to jump on and make sure that I'm doing. How would we know? And I know you said a couple of things that, some ways that we may be able to tell if our blood sugar isn't balanced, but how would we know on a day-to-day basis if our blood sugar isn't balanced and it's creating all those issues in our body?
Well, one of the first signs is your waistline starts to go up. So your weight may not change, but your skirt size, your pant size is getting tighter. You're having to change your belt size. That's a clear first sign. Your blood pressure goes up. So it's not just that your blood sugar goes up, it makes your cholesterol profile worse. Your blood pressure goes up. You're more inflamed. You're more achy. You have brain fog. Waistline expanding is probably the first symptom you might notice. Hopefully, if you go see your doctor every year, they're looking at your fasting blood sugar. That's probably more important by far than measuring cholesterol. It's the number one cause for heart disease isn't high cholesterol, it's elevated blood sugar, or abnormal blood sugar control. So that's really a very basic thing we should all be doing every year. And 100 is elevated. So really we want it less than 90 or 95. And you don't have diabetes till 126, but a lot of people will die from elevated blood sugars before their blood sugar level will reach 126 in a diagnosis of diabetes. So that's way too late to wait for that.
I'm going to repeat that because, to me, that's fascinating. So the reason or what's causing heart disease is really our blood sugar. And I know this has been this has been the thing that's been spoken about over the last several years, is that now experts all agree, or the experts are looking at the causes for heart disease. And the number one thing is blood sugar dysregulation.
Yes.
Wow, that is fascinating. And, the issue with women in menopause too, is that naturally, again, please explain this. And you did allude to it in terms of our hormones and estrogen dipping, but I feel like it kind of goes hand in hand. So it's so important at this time in our lives that we make sure we're eating a whole foods diet, make sure that we're eating that low GI or low glycemic index foods. What are some other tips that we could do, or foods that we can eat that can help us balance our blood sugar levels so that we can really keep it balanced?
Eating sugar and flour are the biggest problems. It's not just table sugar, it's corn syrup, it's all those organic cane sugar, but flour, any form, whether it's whole grain flour, whole wheat flour, or white flour, has the exact same response on our blood sugar as does table sugar. So a bowl of white flour, a bowl of whole wheat flour, or a bowl of sugar is all the same thing. And I think a lot of people are eating like whole grain cereal for breakfast. Then they're having whole wheat bread, and then they're for lunch. And then they have crackers for a snack, and whole grain, whole wheat crackers. And then they're having pasta or some other refined carb for dinner. And it's just way too much. We really need to eat a lot more, like Mediterranean diet foods, vegetable, fruit, beans, nuts, olive oil, a little bit of red wine, seafood, spices and herbs. The food can taste fantastic. It's not deprivation. You're eating delicious food, but we're trying to lower that glycemic load. As you say, glycemic index. I like glycemic load because it's how much sugar is in each serving of food. And, but it's not just that. It's also activity, both getting your heart rate up and having muscle mass and doing strength training. That's equally important. It's not being stressed. Stress raises cortisol, raises blood sugar levels. So it's stress management. And I think the other pillar I always talk about is nutrient intake. If you're nutrient deficient, it impacts blood sugar regulation. So, nutrients like long chain omega-3 fats, B vitamins, zinc, magnesium, they all have a big impact on blood sugar control. So it's, those are the four pillars: the right food, activity, stress management, nutrient If you do those 4 things right, we pretty much solve all our health problems today.
How does exercise control blood sugar?
Well, an aerobic workout does lower your blood sugar. I mean, it revs your metabolism. It makes you more insulin sensitive. So when your insulin does be released, it responds to your cells. So an aerobic workout, getting your heart rate up, is one of the best things to rev your metabolism, burn more calories, and make your cells sensitive to insulin instead of resistant. But strength training has an additional benefit. You're adding muscle mass, and muscle mass is the capacitator to absorb glycogen and sugar, from meals. So the more muscle mass you have, the more sugar you can actually tolerate. And when people lose muscle mass, especially women when they go through menopause, they can't handle the sugar load they could eat prior to that. They just won't handle it anymore. So it's a significant change for them. So both strength training and aerobic activity they're as important as food, clearly.
So you just hit on something that's very interesting to me. I have like a million questions circulating in my head. I'm like, okay, I have so many questions and I want to get through it articulately. So in terms of, you mentioned that when we lose muscle mass, we actually can't handle the sugars as well. You talked about hormones. What are some other reasons that as we get into perimenopause and menopause that we can't handle the sugar the way we were able to before then?
Well, metabolism drops. And teleologically, think about it. As when women are no longer raising children in a tribe, if we were tribal beings living 100,000 years ago when our DNA and genes were kind of set for us, and we haven't changed much since, as women stopped rearing children, they might walk more that day. They were out gathering. They weren't at home around, the compound, the hut, the cave, whatever it was, watching kids. They would walk farther to gather herbs, to gather food, to dig up roots, to catch a bird, collect eggs. They were probably more active. They didn't have the restrictions on staying at home. And so they needed to lower their metabolic rate, calorie burn rate, to survive. So I think we've always valued people as they age, the elders in our society. Teleologically, we want to keep them around. Well, you have to drop their metabolic rate if their function changes in their society. So to me, it makes sense that you have a drop in calorie burn metabolic rate. Women's testosterone, just like men, women's testosterone levels drop and they lose muscle mass. So unless they do more strength training, actually more than they did before, they'll lose muscle mass. That's another important, so that's another physiologic change we're dealing with. And when estrogen and progesterone levels drop naturally, they drop, the estrogen drops about 50%, progesterone even more. That has additional hormonal changes that make us more likely to become insulin resistant and make our blood sugar levels go up. So it's multiple factors. So when a woman goes through menopause, same for guys when they go through andropause, but especially for women, they need to eat better, be more active, and do more strength training. It's a necessity to maintain the same level of health.
I'd like to move on to food for a minute and diet. So you talked about the Mediterranean diet. What are your thoughts on paleo and keto? So if we're talking about keeping those flours out and those sugars out, I would think that you would find that those 2 ways of eating would be beneficial for women in menopause.
Well, when we look at blood sugar control, the number one long-term rated diet is by far Mediterranean diet. It wasn't even close for paleo and keto to come in there. When you're looking at short-term diet, like what can you do for a month? A lot of people can make changes for a month, but to get someone to stay on keto, I have, close associates, friends who promote a keto diet, but they admit it's hard. It's really difficult to do that long-term. And when they travel or they visit guests, it gets oftentimes unintentionally thrown out the window. So keto diet and it's really hard to do properly. You're supposed to eat at least 9 cups of green leafy vegetables every day to safely be on a keto diet and prevent some of the problems from acidosis. It certainly doesn't just mean eating, canned meats and bacon in abundance. And, you want those fruit and vegetables are the healthiest things we eat to block aging and oxidation and inflammation. Fruits and vegetables are essential, and it's challenging to do that so I really like a low glycemic Mediterranean diet. We're cutting out the pasta and the really small portions of pasta, cutting out most of the rice, certainly cutting out the bread, but eating vegetable, fruit, beans, nuts, seafood, some poultry, yogurt, spices and herbs, olive oil. To me, that's the ideal diet. So you can try to do keto. It's very challenging to do properly. Paleo is a little bit easier, but it's still, when you look at 6 months adherence rates, they really drop off significantly. And I think the Mediterranean diet is built in with a higher nutrient density. So if you're trying to meet your nutrient needs, the easiest thing is the Mediterranean diet. And that's the most important. If you look at 6-month adherence, the Mediterranean is the easiest diet, healthy diet on the planet to follow.
Yeah,
So
that's so good for you.
Delicious and easy to do, and you'll be more successful.
So what are your thoughts on legumes? So you said legumes are okay to eat. From a brain perspective or blood sugar regulation, those are fine, since they do have is it a 50-50 protein to carbohydrate ratio?
Well, more importantly, when you eat beans, they give you long sustained blood sugar levels without a spike. So when you eat a lot of things give you a spike in blood sugar, and legumes block that spike. So we don't want no blood sugar all day. You'd feel grumpy. You'd be tired. You'd have bad symptoms. You want constant, steady, low levels of blood sugar. That's what beans provide. Beans are also the highest antioxidant food on the planet. If you're trying to block oxidation, which we do if we want to slow aging, there is no food that even comes close to comparing to the benefits of beans. So beans improve blood sugar, they lower inflammation, they're the highest antioxidant food on the planet. But I got to admit one thing though, probably 10, possibly up to 15, 20% of people are sensitive. They don't have the digestive enzymes, they cause them discomfort. So anytime you have unexplained chronic health problems, one of the first things we should try is an elimination diet. Gluten, dairy, beans, soy, citrus, eggs, those are the really common things that can really drive someone's health into the ground. So I think it's really important with anyone with a problem to try an elimination diet for 3 to 4 weeks. If they really get better, gradually add things back, see what they're sensitive to, and then avoid things they're sensitive to long-term. So probably 10, perhaps 15% of people should be avoiding beans, but the rest of us really benefit from eating them.
Now, you mentioned soy, and soy is a legume. So what are your thoughts on soy, especially for women in perimenopause and menopause?
Well, there's been, in the last 10 years, there's been a huge shift. Like they used to say that eating soy was bad for your thyroid. Well, we now know that none of the studies support that. And some of the biggest thyroid gurus on the planet now are saying, actually, soy's a good thing. The biggest shift is that soy decreases your risk for breast cancer substantially, especially if you eat it as a teenager through puberty. With young women, as they go through puberty and into womanhood, are eating more soy. It decreases changes in their breasts that normally occur and decreases for life their risk of breast cancer. And if a woman's had breast cancer and she eats more soy, there was a really nice article in JAMA showing that it decreases your risk of death and cancer recurrence. So, it really improves your cholesterol, your blood pressure. So if you tolerate them, definitely I recommend not GMO, chemically adulterated soy, but organic, non-GMO soy. It's only about 5 to 10% of soy products, but it's pretty easy to find in any grocery store. So non-GMO organic soy, I think, has many menopause benefits. It improves bone density. It helps with hot flashes. And decreasing breast cancer is perhaps the most important benefit. So there's lots of reasons we should look at adding soy for women as they go through menopause, assuming they're not intolerant.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And also fermented soy. So you don't want to look at the soy isolates. You want to look at like a tempeh or a miso or, the soy foods that actually have been fermented. And to your point about, which is interesting about soy, I am one of those people who just don't tolerate soy very well. Okay. And if I do too much soy, it does impact my thyroid. And I have it's not a great story, but there was a story where I was taking a soy shake in the morning, and it had about 6 milligrams of soy per serving. And the company switched it to 12 and didn't announce it, or I just missed it on the label. And within a couple of weeks, I had put on quite a bit of weight, and I didn't understand why. And I'm like, why am I gaining weight out of nowhere? And this was before I was in menopause. So this isn't, I was in probably peri at this point. And I literally had gained like 10 pounds within a couple of weeks. So for some people, to your point, is some people don't tolerate it very well. And for me in particular, my thyroid didn't like it very much. But then again, I do have thyroid issues. So I do have hypothyroidism. So I do appreciate what you're saying, is that for some people, it will work really well and it is a good food. But like always, we need to listen to our bodies to see if you're not feeling good, or if your throat is itchy, or you're kind of like, oh, my throat doesn't feel so good, or you have other symptoms. Just avoid it, or do the elimination like you're talking about, which I appreciate. I want to move to potatoes for a sec. So I love sweet potatoes and I love regular potatoes. Sweet potatoes I know are good for us. And I know that I want to hear that, check, they're okay to eat on this type of diet to, in order to make sure that our blood sugar is balanced, and please explain why. But what about regular potatoes?
So sweet potatoes have a bit more fiber, and that orange color really is a pigment that's good for us. So there's more to beta carotene, there's more carotenoids, healthy compounds in sweet potatoes compared to regular white potatoes. Now, potatoes have like mashed potatoes, they're highly processed. They have they're baked or boiled, and then you puree them. Well, they have a higher glycemic load, sugar load, than table sugar. So see what kind of potato? If you boil your potato, it has about 20% less glycemic load than if you fry it or if you bake it in the oven. So boiling is the way to go. The little potatoes have about 30% less blood sugar release, because if you keep the skin and they're little, they've got a much higher skin to interior ratio, and you have more fiber and most of the nutrients and fibers in the skin. So little potatoes that are boiled have less blood sugar and more nutrient. And then if you refrigerate them, if you boil them, refrigerate them, and then heat them back up, the refrigeration process changes the blood sugar structure, the sugar structure in the potato, and has a lower 25% lower glycemic load again. So if you use little potatoes, you boil them, you refrigerate them, and you eat them later, hot or cold, you actually can lower the glycemic load, by 30 to 40% total. Potatoes still have one of the highest glycemic loads of all of them. So I would say small portions, infrequent. It's not like broccoli, or some other green vegetable we could eat every day. So, yeah, of course. So potatoes are in small, infrequent serving sizes. So there you go.
Would it be the same thing for, like, say, corn? Just because these are starchy vegetables, would it be similar for that?
Corn is the reason we give corn to animals to fatten them up, because it fattens them up, and it has a very high glycemic load, and it doesn't have a tremendous nutrient full. So you're getting a lot of calories for the nutrients you get. I'd much rather that you're eating, a sweet potato or squash, or if you're looking for a starch, something like that. But it doesn't come close. They have dramatically more blood sugar jump than you get from broccoli, kale, even beets have a relative, the myth is we make sugar from beets, but beets don't have that much sugar, neither do carrots. You have to eat 9 large carrots to really raise your blood sugar significantly, and nobody can eat that many carrots. So, a cup of carrots, a cup of beets, those are great foods that have really high nutrient value and don't raise your blood sugar very much.
Those are great tips. So thank you very much. And especially we can roast vegetables, mix them up, put them, now with a little bit of like olive oil or avocado oil. I mean, they're so delicious. And to eat the rainbow, right? To try different things. So those are.
And I'm glad you said olive oil and avocado oil, because those are my 2 favorite cooking oils.
Yeah.
For high heat, more than 400, I tend to use avocado oil. Less than 400, I try to use extra virgin olive oil, because extra virgin oil has lots of nutrient benefit, but you can't use it at high heat.
Yeah.
And avocado oil is a really nice, clean, healthy oil that it does take high heat. So thank you for mentioning those, my 2 favorite oils right off the bat.
Yeah, no problem. And I love avocado oil too, because it can go up to like 500 degrees. So
525.
525, that's pretty amazing. So if you're doing a stir fry or anything. So yeah, glad we're on the same page. I love that. I have one more question for you, although I could talk to you all day. I have one more question for you, at least for this interview. What are your thoughts on intermittent fasting and its effect on blood sugar levels?
Well, there's another really nice idea for blood sugar control. So for some time, I've been advocating partial intermittent fasting. That means at least 2 to 3 days a week. When you say partial, it's not every day, that you would look at fasting for a minimum of 12, preferably up to 15 hours to get some ketones going. There's actually pretty good data that partial intermittent fasting 2 to 3 times a week has as much benefit as being in ketosis 24/7 all the time. So yeah, we get a lot of benefit when we fast. Now that usually means, so that would mean like say at 9 o'clock at night, nothing with calories. You can drink herbal tea, unsweetened, can have water, but nothing to eat with calories until, if you're doing 15 hours until 9 the next morning, 6 the next morning, if you're just, it all depends on how many hours you're trying to do. But I'm usually thinking like 9 to 9 is 12 hours. That's the minimum. 9 p.m. to noon would be more optimal. 15 hours. Everybody's going to have a nice ketone load by the time they get to noon. And that's the first couple times you do it, you might feel hungry. So I always suggest people try it several days in a row. And usually by the third, fourth day, you don't have that morning hunger anymore. It's a sign your blood sugar control is improving. You're not having insulin that's too high. High insulin levels make you hungry. So as soon as you get your insulin sensitive, you get rid of some of that craving and hunger issues, and partial intermittent fasting is a good way to do that. I would recommend 12 to 15 hour fast every day. If you maybe had diabetes, really high blood sugar levels, I'd probably recommend 12 to 15 hour fast every day. So it kind of depends on the intensity, fits with how much problem you have. I think all of us would really benefit 2 to 3 days a week.
And I love that you're saying partially, because for me, I love intermittent fasting actually. And I used to do it, like even up to like a month ago, every single day. And I would go even sometimes 18 hours. And what I found was that that's actually too long for me. So now I've scaled back. So I'm doing it only a few times a week, and I'm doing the minimum of 12, but I'm trying to go to that 15. And I find it works for me. So in terms of mental clarity, so again, listening to our body and making sure, and I love that you're recommending that as well. So just for those who might be new to intermittent fasting, can you explain just a little bit about what it is and how best, let's set them up for success if they want to try it?
So, I mean, it kind of depends what time you go to bed. Again, depending on the illness situation you might have, you might want 3 hours of no food before bedtime. Usually an hour and a half to 2 hours is kind of more of a minimum time we want to stop eating before we go to bed. So figure out your bedtime and say 2 hours before that, we stop eating and drinking alcohol too. That's a caloric beverage. Yep. Again, herbal tea is like it after 2 hours before bedtime. So if that's go to bed at 11, you go to sleep at 11, and that would be 9 o'clock. So that would mean from at least 9 to 9 minimally, you're fasting. Drink water, but there's no sugar. You can have coffee, you could have tea. You're just not putting any milk or sugar or something like in it. And not that hard to do. And then as you said, you try to expand it from 12 to 15 hours, a couple of days a week, and see if you can go till noon. Some people don't want to exercise during that. I think once you get used to it, you can work out in the morning and you don't even notice. You're fine with the workout. But it's when you first start off, you may not want to throw in an exercise routine in the morning while you're if you're new to fasting. And what you're going to notice, here's the big issue. There's either we're growing fat or burning fat. When you turn off food coming in, you're always in the growing fat mode. The worst thing you can do is eat before you go to bed, wake up at 2 a.m, have a snack, and get up and eat first thing in the morning. And you never reach a point where you're burning fat and breaking fat down. You're always growing fat. So that break is really helpful. Our brain, especially our brain, stops producing beta amyloid plaque, the plaque associated with Alzheimer's, when we fast. So when you're eating during the day, you're literally growing plaque to protect your brain from inflammation. When you stop eating and you're fasting, you start breaking down beta amyloid plaque. So either you're growing it or you're potentially shrinking it. And fasting helps with that. Think of cancers and things. When we stop eating and you're fasting, you're telling borderline cells to commit suicide and die off. So fasting gets rid of borderline bad cells and helps regenerate new healthy cells. So if you want to stay young and healthy, and if you want to keep your blood sugar and weight controlled, then I think it makes just sense to have some fasting periods added to your day so that you can get into a cleaning mode. Your body cleans itself out when you're in a fasting state. And we all probably need some of that.
Oh yeah. I mean, we just live in whatever the world we're living in. So absolutely. So again, I'm just going to recap it because I think that information is so awesome and critical. So basically by fasting, it's literally giving our body a rest. It'll start to, is it break down the amyloid plaque or it just doesn't form? Like, does it actually, it actually kind of helps it to break down?
If we're not, it's just like plaque in your arteries. Either you're growing it or you're shrinking it.
Okay. So you're not
it's
basically
kind of A or B kind of mechanism.
Got it. So it's shrinking.
So there are periods when we can actually start removing it or when we're producing it for both artery plaque and for brain plaque. They have similar mechanisms.
So for people who want to know if it's working for them, would they just feel overall better? Are there you said there's a blood sugar test, which I'm going to ask you for the name of, so that way we can write it down and people can go ask, our viewers can go ask their doctors. But are there, can we notice it? We won't have memory fog. We'll feel like we'll have more energy.
Sharper, quicker, more energetic, more vibrant, sexier. Your sex drive improves, you sleep better. I mean, those are all signs of really good blood sugar control. Insulin resistance is really bad. You feel awful, you're tired, and your system isn't working properly. It's like putting dirt in the gas tank and wondering, okay, I wonder why my car's not running well. Isn't that amazing? No one would ever go grab a handful of dirt and put it in the gas tank. But how many people might stop at the gas station and buy junk food and then I wonder why I don't feel good.
Dr. Masley, thank you for the fascinating conversation today. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you feel you'd like to still share with our listeners and our viewers when it comes to blood sugar balance?
Well, most people are waiting for something to go wrong, to have your doctor say, oh, you have high blood sugar or there's some major problem, right? We procrastinate. We don't go to fix something until it's broken. But the reality is, if we don't deal with our blood sugar, we're growing plaque, our brains are shrinking, we're decreasing our quality of life. It affects us in multiple silent ways. So my biggest message is, don't wait. This is your chance to feel fantastic, improve your health, still eat delicious food. It's, a Mediterranean lifestyle where, you're adding activity and you're managing your stress and you're eating delicious food every day. You feel fabulous. So get aboard, get started. Don't wait for something to fall apart, which is what most Americans are doing. So I'm hoping your listeners will be proactive and want to start making a difference immediately.
Where could people reach you if they wanted to get in contact with you?
Well, for additional information, they can always visit drmasley.com, drmasley.com. I've got recipes I post, blogs, free information, and really to help people optimize their health and feel fantastic.
Thank you so much.